to all the listeners who are here. We're having another Market Madness space. We're going to be chatting about your favorite stocks. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the market as well, switch things up a bit with some of our speakers here. For the listeners, I'd love to just say this right off the bat. If you have a question that you want one of these speakers to answer, or anything along those lines, uh, tweet it at me or DM me. My DMs are open. Feel free to just throw that in now because I'm going to try to make later on in this call for any of the speakers that are on in maybe like 20, 30 minutes. We'll try to hit on some of your questions. I really want to make these spaces focused around both the speakers and the audience. I don't want it to be so lopsided. Without further ado, we have a huge matchup this week. If anybody's been looking at the matchups for the Sweet 16, I did post them. They're on my page if you go take a look at that. And we have SE, which is that FinTwit darling, going against PLTR. And the reason that this is such a crazy matchup is because PLTR really just out of the blue upended Tesla last week. That vote got over 3,000 votes, and there were big accounts backing both sides, especially Tesla, and PLTR pulled out the win. So, Parrot, I know that you've been preparing a little bit more. I've been waiting to hear more of the pitch. I know you've been saying you have the pitch on SE. So, talk to us about the pitch SE, and then talk to us about SE going up against the stock that just beat Tesla.
Yeah, so it's going to be a tough matchup this week with PLTR, and I think they just announced another government contract today too, so that ought to be fun. So yeah, let's just talk about SE. So SE is a founder-led business. It's based on hyper growth, and they've been delivering quarter after quarter, every quarter. So um, they've started with a digital entertainment business, Garena, and it's really a cash machine for them. Their number one game, Free Fire, it's the most downloaded game globally over the last 2 years. I think Garena produced something like 1.3 billion in profit in 2020 with a 65% operating margin. Their e-commerce business, Shopee, it's growing 150% year over year. Southeast Asia has 400 million internet shoppers, and it's expected to 3 times over the by 2025, so to 300 billion market. And they continue to expand into new areas, including Latin America, where they're taking on Macro Libre, and they're winning market share. There's a lead. They've taken the lead in Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines. Pretty much everywhere they're at, they're taking over. So they're pushing everybody out and getting market share. So their strategy is working so far. Um, a large part of Southeast Asia is unbanked or underbanked. And I hate to say the number because I tried to look it up and couldn't find it. I think I remember it was something like 80%, but their third business, Seed Money, provides digital financing services basically to this demographic. It basically gives them a mode to spend money on their platform. So it's relatively small still. I think they generated 24 million in the Q4 2020, but it's growing 600% year over year. So um, they also acquired an Indonesian bank, BKE, that's going to further expand their financial capabilities. Um, and Seed Money kind of completes the cycle. It keeps users on their ecosystem all the way from entertainment, shopping, payments, banking. It's going to keep them there. And finally, really, Force continues to surprise us. He keeps pushing the limits. I don't know that we can even imagine everything that he's planning to do. But a couple of things, they've started a Shopee food service in some areas, and it's grew almost 200% last year. They've actually taken over the number one spot from Grab in Vietnam on food delivery. They also have CAI, which it's not I don't have a lot of information on it. It's not a lot of published, but it's just another example of what Force is doing, pushing the C limited, what they can do, pushing kind of the boundaries. Um, the bear case for them, I always hear the same thing as the negative cash flow, and really it's right now it's about execution on growth. I believe they can turn the printer on pretty much whenever they want to. My guess is they're not going to be cash flow positive till 2022, um, but I fully support where they're at on revenue, putting the revenue back into growth. Their market share is really the most important priority right now. Once they get those users, on their ecosystem, they're likely to stay there. So, um, and really, we haven't even touched on the social aspect. I know most people in the United States don't use Shopee, so people don't realize how they're incorporating social media aspects into their platform. it really is starting to it makes it sticky. It's similar to what Square's trying to do for those that are familiar with that. And for those that don't know them, Sea Limited is really Amazon Shop, Square, PayPal, Microsoft Dash, all those companies rolled into one. They are the three-headed monster, and they continue to add more heads. So uh, they they're they're the company to beat, I think, in this whole tournament.
I love that you gave both the bull and the bear case there, and you really broke it down for us. So let's take a look real quick at what C has been doing over the past year. Up 434%, peaked like most of these growth companies around February 11th. And then since around March 25th, they've had a nice little run up. They've ran back up from underneath 200 back up to 235. Where did you see them moving in the next 6 to 12 months?
I still think they'll hit 300 by the end of the year. I think we'll see new all-time highs by the end of the year. I think their growth's going to continue. So the next few quarters, they're going to continue to post, massive year-over-year growth, and we'll see new all-time highs this year.
Okay, love to hear that. And then just focusing on the matchup real quick, PLTR, I think they just released today that they signed another government contract. They're definitely picking up a little bit of steam, but they haven't had quite nearly that price movement that something like SC has had. How do you see these stacking up from a popularity perspective?
I think they're both kind of very popular on FinTwit right now. Outside of that space, I'm not sure who knows either one of them. So it's going to be interesting on who can get the message out this week.
Love that. Love that. That's great. And then I guess my final question on SE right now is SE it's your largest holding, right?
It is, yep.
Do you plan, what's your time horizon, I guess, with keeping that as a large holding? Is there at any point which you would trim? If it was to, shoot up to a certain point, would the fundamentals have to change? What would have to change for you to, I know that you've, added to SE, or maybe it's a full position for you. For that position size to move, what would have to happen?
Right now my intention is to hold. I think I have just enough shares for that position to hit $1 million when they hit a 1 trillion market cap, and that's the goal. So
That's
I'd like to see it
perfect.
hit 1 million.
That's perfect. Love to see that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to up my share count to replicate that. Parrot, thank you so much. I know that you had some busy stuff today, so I'm glad we got you in first. If you're still around in a bit, we'll get back to you, but we have a couple more speakers with some time-sensitive stuff. Decade, I'm going to go to you, but Max, since you're still on, Max, if you're on right now, can you give us the 2-minute sob story for Ozone?
That was a very, very tough matchup, and I thought that it's gonna be a different outcome. But it is what it is, and as hard as it is to take this loss, and we just gotta move on, and that's it. I knew that it's very difficult to go against meme stock like GameStop or AMC or any other ones around. So I was just thinking that we're gonna build on that momentum since the company released earnings last week, and earnings were very, very good. I was very impressed with everything that CEO said. I was very happy to find out they're gonna keep growing at a very, very good rate, which is about 95% year over year from revenue standpoint. And I was really thinking that it's gonna keep advancing stage over stage. But if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of like for the first 5 hours, Ozone was leading pretty good, like 58, 59% versus 42, 41% for GameStop. But then all of a sudden something happened, and it just completely turned around. But well, I wish nothing but the best for GameStop, and we'll see how it goes after this.
Yeah, it's gonna be super interesting. GameStop versus XRP this week. Thank you, Max. I'm glad you're able to say a little bit more about your love for Ozone, and I feel like sometimes here, Max, and then this will be the last question. We'll go to Decade.
Yeah, yeah.
So sometimes for
Right.
me, right, I'm a big Baltimore Ravens fan, for example. So let's say my team loses to another team in the playoffs. There's one of two mindsets. Either I hope that team they get mollywopped in the next round and they get what's coming to them, or I'm like, I want that team to just destroy everyone else in its path and show that it was such a strong contender, and that's why my team lost to it. So Ozone lost to GME. What's your real hope for GME? Don't give me the nice stuff like I wish it the best. What do you want GME to do from here on out? Because it's facing XRP and then a very likely matchup with Bitcoin.
Well, to be honest, of course, my first thought was I would love GME to be absolutely destroyed by XRP in the next round to like 90 to 10 or something of this nature. Yeah, I do have the same mindset. I'm a big Liverpool supporter, and every time when they lose to someone, like I was like, I wish this team will lose the next time on the next stage. And but at the same time, part of me, like you just mentioned, if this is the team that beat my team, I guess this is the only team that deserves to win the entire tournament. So it's kind of like an interesting back and forth of this mindset.
Yeah, well, we got both sides.
Yeah, we really do. So my bet for the next round is XRP. That's it. Go
Okay.
Ripple.
XRP, they're the Cinderella story, man. They've been taking people out left and right. So real quick, I'm about to turn it over to Decade Investor, but if you are listening, just so that you know what you're listening to, we are chatting about market madness. So I'm Gav Blacksberg. I'm the COO at Wolf Financial. We are a startup, and we are running Market Madness, which is essentially March Madness, but for stocks, ETFs, and cryptos. So all of these are competing via a popularity contest, essentially. And if you are actually listening to this and you want to win possible prizes and premium subscriptions to places like Seeking Alpha, TradingView, Finami, Social Sentiment, you can go to my page. You can click on the link in my bio, and you can fill out a second chance Sweet 16 bracket for free, no cost. Takes about 2 to 3 minutes. You can do it on mobile, do it on desktop, and you can win those prizes. So we're really excited to just have as many people as possible participating. You can even influence the vote by voting yourself. So without further ado from that, I'm going to flip it over to Decade Investor. So Decade Investor, we've had you chat a little bit about this matchup a couple times, but VTI just keeps, not VTI, QQQJ just keeps chugging. You beat VOO backed by Budget Dog. You beat VTI, the freaking whole entire stock market backed by Hipster Finance, and now you're coming in to another matchup. And you know what? This is such an interesting matchup because the ETF that you're going against has just consistently outperformed as well. It's been the underdog both times, and it's won both times. So talk to me about QQQJ versus Buzz, the Dave Portnoy ETF.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? So yeah, like you just said, Gov, like we beat VOO, we beat VTI, and now we're taking on Buzz. So it's three big dogs. Well, two big dogs, and then Buzz is a big dog in the sense of social sentiment, in my opinion. It's literally a social sentiment fund. So will be an interesting one to go up to and up against. But yeah, like I always say, every time listed on the NASDAQ. So I'm a huge fan of QQQJ. If you follow me, I talk about it pretty much every day, or one of my comments has the stock, cash tag on there, QQQJ. But no, I'm really excited about this matchup, and I'm excited about this ETF in particular, just in the general scheme of things, just because it's the next gen. It's literally called the next gen 100 ETF for the NASDAQ. But in my opinion, this is the cream of the crop of the future of tech companies. But it's not a full tech, but it's just a fund that comprises of, in my opinion, the future of the NASDAQ, the future of tech. And so I'm really, it's a new ETF. Let me get this date right, because I wasn't 100% sure. So October, it has just started in October of 2020. So very, very new ETF, but still one that, in my opinion, can be a huge player in the future. And so I'm buying it up like it's going out of style right now. But no, I think QQJ, this matchup against Buzz will be interesting. Buzz backed Dave Portnoy, big, social media star, a big platform, huge platform. But I think that, QQJ already took down VOO, already took down VTI. You can't get any bigger than those. I guess you could get VT, which is the entire market, world market, but those two you really can't get bigger than. And so I think Buzz will be a very, in my opinion, from what we saw last week against VTI, I think Buzz will be a very easy opponent, and it will be a good matchup to follow here on Thursday.
Fantastic breakdown there. So real quick, I'm going to ask you because I liked how Parrot gave it. What's the bear case for QQQJ?
Yeah. So, like I said, it's one of those, it's the next gen. So you have that, future of tech, these more mid-cap companies. So bear case could easily be, because these are these mid-cap companies, these smaller companies, they're not massive like the QQQ, the top 100. They have that risk. It's that risk that's involved, that risk of, company XYZ not being able to stay afloat because they're still trying to grow. They're not like an Apple where they're very, strong in who they are as a company and worldwide. So I think just the bear case is you're in those smaller mid-cap size companies and stocks that can go either way, right? That risk that can bring on more reward, but can also bring on more loss, right? You're kind of playing with fire in this ETF and this compared to, like a QQQ or an S&P 500 ETF. So I think just the bear case is that just you have these smaller companies that can do great. Today was up. Actually, it was down, but aftermarket it's up. But it's in the last week. It's since last Monday. It's been up 3%. So you kind of have that like up down play, that risk factor built into this ETF just because what is geared for. So that going in with that bear case. So I don't see a massive bear case. But I'm also biased because I'm very bullish on this ETF. So I know Parrot, he did a good job giving a bear case, and I'm super bull. So it's like but no.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
There is that risk that's involved in this ETF just because again it's a mid cap size. So you have to keep that in mind, and can definitely be a fear factor for some that want to be not as risky.
Definitely. Last question, and then I'll let you go. Is QQQJ the largest holding in your portfolio?
Currently it is. And I have no plans to trim. I do have plans to continue to build this up because at the price it's at, it closed today at 32.46. I still think it's uber undervalued in the future. Now, I mean, my name's Decade Investor, so I'm thinking long term. So I think in the long term, it's still uber undervalued. So I'm buying it up for these 30s, and even if it hits 40s and 50s, I'm still buying it up. I think anything under 50 is undervalued for this ETF. So it is the largest holding. I don't have any plans to trim, nor do I have any plans to not do anything more. I'm going to continue to buy more of this ETF for sure.
Love the conviction. Fantastic breakdown. For anyone that was just listening, that was QQQJ. That's the Invesco Exchange Traded Fund Trust. It's for basically the NASDAQ Next Gen 100. As Decade Investor explained, they came online around October, and they're up 21.16% since. And honestly, their chart looks pretty nice. I like how it's looking. If you're looking at moving averages, I think it looks pretty nice as well for anybody that's a technical analysis person. So thank you so much, Decade. I know you're a busy guy. Anything else you want to say before you got to go?
No, I just appreciate. I mean, every time we have these spaces, it's just insane the amount of value that's provided. I know I'm a speaker, but I'm learning so much from everybody else. Maybe the most from Parrot because he's my favorite follow. I love his day-to-days, and he's a Midwest guy, so I like that too. But no, if you're listening, this stuff, what Wolf's putting on here is amazing. So Max, thank you. But no, that's about it. I got to head off here. So if you have any questions, obviously send them to Wolf or send me a message. But wishing the best for everyone on the rest of the bracket, and vote QQQJ.
Drop the schedule. I'm going to be posting that soon. But this week, we have a ton going on. We have Market Madness spaces on both Monday, so that's tonight, and Wednesday. The one on Wednesday is going to be at 8 p.m. Jonah Lupton's going to be on that. I think, I don't know, Parrot if he can. Some others if they can. I know Luke, Lamonti are all going to be on that. And then on Tuesday, I'm actually starting a new series. This is going to be on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Parrot's definitely going to be on that one. And it's going to be called Stock Center. It's It's basically like Sports Center, but it's gonna be called Stock Center, and we're just gonna be chatting about like what happened in the market that day. I'm gonna moderate it. Probably maybe introduce some of my personal account, moderate that, and then on Thursday, for anyone who knows Gannon Breslin, is it Breslin? Am I saying that right? Rebel Markets. I'm just gonna call him Rebel because that's what I'm used to. We're gonna be doing a live interview on Spaces. So me and Gannon, we're gonna be breaking it down at 4 p.m. right when market closes EST on Thursday, and then on Friday, as always, I'm gonna have my reoccurring series, which is called the Weekly Howl. We're gonna be having on some big accounts from TikTok. Actually, some people with hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok are gonna be gracing our presence. And those are just going to continue. Got some big names lined up. If you like people like Jonah, if you like Brian Feroldi, if you like Max, Justin the finance guy, just go ahead and give me a follow because I'm going to be having all of these guys on. All right, enough of me talking. I want to turn it over now to Lamonti because Lamonti's backing one of the big challengers here. And Tim, Lamonti, I think you got it. Tim also tweeted. He sent like a whole thing that he wants to hear from you. And real quick, before I turn over to Lamonti, I already gotten a couple DMs. If you're in the audience listening and you have questions for one of these speakers or for myself or just in general, go ahead and shoot me a DM or tweet at me. I'm saving those DMs for the end of this call, and we're going to answer as many as we can. But Lamonti, floor is all yours.
Yeah, just talking about the Bitcoin and more generally Bitcoin versus Ethereum matchup coming up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, I mean, if everyone's been following along, you've probably seen that Bitcoin probably has the largest spreads currently when it comes to the voting polls. Right around that 87% of votes are going towards Bitcoin pretty much the whole way through. I do think this is going to be one of the harder matchups that Bitcoin will face in the market madness with Ethereum, given that it's first mover advantage versus the close second or the younger brother, as some would call it. From a technical stance, I will say that from the last time I talked about Bitcoin, we're still in that choppy land right around that 60,000 mark. If I can see 62,000 and momentum hold and support hold around that, I do think we see this next leg up. But until then, it could be working in that 50 to 60 range. I need to see some confirmation of a breakout from that range for anything to truly change from what it's currently doing. On the Ethereum side, technically speaking, you actually saw a nice breakout from about a little over 2,000 here this week. This might be a start of a new uptrend. Kind of had support coming around the 50-day moving average, right around that 1,600 mark. And then it broke out from that 2,000 range. So this might be a next leg up. It could be purely just swing traders playing on the technicals. It could be a synergy aligned with how Ethereum allows smart contracts and how that's being utilized with NFTs. So there could be a lot of reasons for it, but it definitely looks like a new uptrend is starting on the Ethereum side.
Very interesting. And did you see Tim's question/tweet?
I did not. Let me check.
Okay. Let me see. I know that he sent it, I guess, to me. All right, here, I'll just read it to you. He said, great panel. I want Lamonti's opinion on Twitter and how he envisions Jack integrating payments, specifically Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptos to accelerate global payments with tipping, subs, and e-com, eventually skipping the need for cross-border exchange rates and settlements like you would get with Square or PayPal.
Oh, that's a tough question without having any research into it. So I guess the question is really on Twitter and how that can benefit from Square. Is that correct?
I think it's more like, can Twitter, kind of benefit from Square, and just the fact that they're so Bitcoin savvy already, could they, when they go ahead and they try to introduce payments like tipping or super likes or whatever it is, can they integrate it right off the bat or within the first few months, maybe with crypto, so that they're doing it on blockchain and they can escape some of the exchange rates and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, there can be some interesting things that come about. It wouldn't be necessarily with Bitcoin, though. I mean, it can be a large holding for them, and they're using that as this digital asset on their books. But when it comes to kind of leveraging blockchain for Square's business model, it could either be built out internally and have some other means of creating those synergies when you think about like time to deliver payments or time to receive payments, or it could go the route of using more like the Ethereum network where it allows smart contracts and actually acts as like a coding platform for blockchain. Other than that, I haven't followed Square much. Probably should follow it more, but yeah, I mean that's probably the best response I could give to that question.
Yeah, appreciate that. And the good news is that I brought on someone tonight to speak specifically about Square. So, Fat Baby, you've been listening. Maybe you want to lend some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. You would have assumed those kind of crossovers would have already happened with Twitter and Square, but as it's been well noted with Twitter, they just went through a lack of innovation period. And they've talked about the reasons behind that. I don't know. I haven't seen a ton on the Twitter end that would make me think that they're coming super quick with some sort of payments. But I have seen the tip jar kind of kind of moves on their end where they've been betaing that in spaces, stuff like that. So I think that could be the first one, but I know they're researching the crypto, but it's hard to say how they implemented on that and pretty early on because especially because Bitcoin isn't always the most friendly to that kind of transaction, and Jack is so Bitcoin friendly. The combination of those two, um, it will take a little work, and I'd imagine that Twitter would be more Bitcoin friendly just because Jack is so.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that thought pattern. Lamonti, real quick, if you're comfortable sharing, is Bitcoin a large percentage of your portfolio?
Yeah, so I have a funny story onto this. So I owned probably about, anywhere from the range of 6 to 20 coins back in 2014 and was really just swing trading them, uh, getting my feet wet, so to say, in the space. It helped me when I have money in the industry. It helps me to pay attention to it more because now I have an interest in it, not only just from a knowledge stance, but a monetary interest in it. But ended up visiting my crypto allocation back towards March when you saw March 2020 when you saw a lot of asset classes start to decline with the expectations of COVID. But as of right now, cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency esque. So think about publicly traded mining companies and things of that nature. It totals right around the 80 to 85% of my portfolio.
Sweet. That's a pretty sizable percentage there. If Tim is here, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and make Tim real quick, just invite him to speak. I think he might have wanted to follow up a bit on that question and ask a little bit more clarity. Then we're going to roll right into Fat Baby, who's going to be covering a little bit more on Square. But Tim is here. Go for it, Tim.
Yeah, no, that was awesome, Lamonte and Fat Baby. So kind of what I was referencing is, obviously the tip feature is, days and weeks upon being available in the public beta test. What I was referencing was, basically I think the initial integration on payments is just going to be the bridge to connect all the different digital wallets to Twitter. So, for instance, like if we're in Twitter Spaces, you'll be able to see a tip jar by the public, by the speaker, and if you find value to it, you could technically tip that person. And then from there, you're going to have a variety of options. So you'd, for instance, select Cash App, for instance, and then from there, you'll be able to maybe select down the line whether you want to actually pay in Bitcoin, pay in Ethereum, other cryptos, and just kind of how that might utilize Twitter as the Trojan horse for international expansion for Square and PayPal and others, because everybody in most countries are utilizing Twitter. So how can Twitter kind of implement crypto to reduce the time settlement that people have when they're doing cross-border exchange, as well as the exchange rate that Wolf was referring to. So I think from an applications perspective, that kind of fits into the crypto bull thesis of, I know Bitcoin isn't the most efficient, but is there a way to kind of reduce, quickly enter new markets and get the peer-to-peer payments on the crypto side that would then propel Square, PayPal, and potentially Twitter if they were, given like a broker fee for all transactions?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I didn't even think of Square coming with this tipping feature and integrating it with social media, but at the end of the day, from Bitcoin stance, that allows for a new channel or another channel of volume to come into the space if Bitcoin is leveraged for a feature like that. So from that perspective, it's good on the price movements of Bitcoin, but it's also a really interesting tactic or feature that they potentially would add on. I think that would be amazing to add into Twitter, where you have this ability to show your appreciation to those that you're following and getting your content from. But I'm not sure how that gets integrated really without thinking it through more than just on the spot.
Yeah.
But I definitely think there could definitely be some synergy there. But then on the flip side, how does that go with payment integration through Twitter and the regulatory holes that you have to probably go through for that?
Yeah, I was hoping that, Twitter, so if Square, wanted to, kind of globalize a little bit better, I think it would be more difficult to enter a new international market that they're not currently in without, say, a masking agent such as Twitter, for instance. So I was kind of curious of how you think, just from a strategic perspective, utilizing crypto would benefit just the velocity of payments through a social media platform like Twitter, and just how that would propel a Square, PayPal, or even Twitter if they were to get a broker fee of all transactions. Because I think that's where you probably get the most value, is just the frequency of transactions and the fee that these payment apps take on that.
Yeah, definitely. Let me research more into that, and then we can follow back up and kind of bash some ideas together.
Awesome. And then lastly, on the Bitcoin front, so you had mentioned earlier about the support being roughly like 50,000, and the key level on the high side to be able to kind of unlock the next leg up is 62,000. Where do you if it breaks that 62,000 level, where do you see it going?
Yeah, so actually me and Wolf chatted about short-term and long-term horizon I have for Bitcoin specifically. I think if you see a breakout of 62,000 and continued momentum and support around that range, and not just a blip over it and it back down into the mid 50s, I could see 80 to 85,000 coming here in the next 3 to 6 months. Long term, I'm looking to exit probably around the 6-digit range. Plan B, he has a lot of good content out there at 100 trillion USD on Twitter. Kind of thinking, he kind of frames it as in Bitcoin's market cap could eventually take over gold's market cap, which for it to do that, it would have to about like 9.8x from here. So that's an interesting way an interesting way of visualizing it. But at the end of the day, once I have a large gain in my portfolio, eventually I want to take some gains off the table, and I'll just play with house money when it comes to that point. So we'll see here in the next 3 to 6 months. April has been a very good month in terms of public equities. I think it's been one of the best months the last 20 years. I posted about 2 weeks ago, and you could see some of that funnel. You could see some of that appreciation funneling into the crypto space, same as that we saw in March of 2020. Everything dropped. You could see some of that capital start to be put to use, and that would be a catalyst for Bitcoin getting to that 80 range here in the next 3 to 6 months. But I do think April will be a solid month for Bitcoin.
Awesome.
Cool, guys.
Hope so.
Gonna steer through a few more areas real quick. So, Fat Baby, you had started with the Square. So we talked a lot about the Bitcoin side. So maybe touch on some of the other aspects of Square. And specifically, let's touch on Square going up against DMTK and why this is such an interesting matchup. So, for everyone listening, this is a popularity contest, essentially. This is a Twitter poll. And as we all know, Jonah Lupton loves DMTK, but he also loves CELH. In fact, he picked CELH to win, and Square kind of drubbed it. So, the question is, we're coming up now. DMTK just beat the hell out of Penn, and Square beat the hell out of CELH. How does this matchup go down? What's your thoughts, Fat Baby?
I mean, Square's been a monster this whole time, sort of like Bitcoin has in the tournament. And I just don't think Dermatech has the name, the brand recognition, all that kind of stuff to really carry it past Square. With Square, you get a ton of people who are long on FinTwit for so many different reasons. It's got so many good things going for it between the very strong brand, the very crypto-friendly company, amazing unit economics behind it with a pretty solid growth as well. And then on top of all of that, it's really a recovery stock with their seller ecosystem and all the reductions that we've had in for restaurants, retail, all that kind of stuff has really been struggling and will start to be picking back up. So on top of everything that Square has going for it, it's definitely a recovery stock as well. So I just think that the amount of investors behind Square, the really positive sentiment behind Square, and then the lack of brand name behind Dermatech will lead Square to the victory there. But it's hard. I said the exact same thing over Penn, and then Dermatech came out and destroyed Penn. But Square's been on a run. They destroyed Spotify. They destroyed Celsius, and now they're coming for Dermatech. And then after that, not to look ahead, but I think there's a showdown with C going forward, which is going to be a real clash of FinTwist favorites.
100% agree. C versus Square would make some people tear their hair out. However, it's just a game, right? It's just a contest here. But talk to me real quick about Square, I guess, in your holdings. I know it's one of your largest holdings, right?
Yeah. So Spotify's my largest holding. Square's my second largest holding.
Mm-hmm.
I've really just been loading up on it for a long time. Part of it is I'm just a fan of Jack. I think he's underrated. I think Square has shown that it's a business loaded with optionality, which I love. They have the two different ecosystems between Seller and Cash App that integrate between each other a little stronger than people realize. And as the Seller ecosystem and the Cash App ecosystem begins to grow, there could be network effects between the two of those, and really Square going after the Visa, MasterCards of the world and trying to get a little more money out of every transaction that they get. I think they see the fat cut on that end and say, we can take that down. And then on top of that, there's everything else within Square. They're just a weird company. If you look, they've got branding items. You can buy Cash App clothing. They just bought Tidal. They're not afraid to be different, which I like. And it shows that it's working as well. So,
Yeah, it definitely is. And they're going in a really unique direction. I like Square. I own Square, all about it. So thank you for that. Real quick, we have a special guest. Oh, Tim, please make sure you're muted. A special guest, and that is the Guru Examiner. So Guru is super interesting. If you haven't seen what they're doing, go ahead and check out their page. They do what we're doing, this social sentiment tracking, but they, of course, do it at a much higher level where they're actually tracking a number of different FinTwit creators and seeing the movements that they're having upon stocks. And I found it really interesting. And me and Guru chatted, and he actually was super nice and came on and is going to talk to us about what he's seeing as some of the sentiment behind the stocks that are in this tournament. So go ahead, Guru. Floor is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you for that introduction. So basically, last night what we did is we quickly grabbed the last 10,000 tweets from across all of Twitter for each of these tickers, and fed them into our sentiment engine, and that powers our currently our trends tools. And we wanted to kind of find out how the Twitter audience is feeling about each of these stocks. We had Bitcoin at the very top. I mean, it beat out QQQJ by almost 50 times in terms of sentiment. And when you put that as a matchup versus ETH, it's actually a pretty even match. We have Bitcoin with a 50.5% chance of winning and Ethereum with a 49.5 chance of winning. So it's a total toss up there. Definitely room for error. Then, you go down to XRP versus GameStop. One thing that we found pretty interesting is that crypto as a whole beat out any stock significantly. So our top three were, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP. We have XRP at a 53.72% chance of winning. I actually posted this on my Twitter underneath the Twitter Spaces links, a picture of kind of the matchup. So if anybody's interested in checking that out. And so it's XRP 53.7% versus GameStop a 46.2%. Then we go down to PLTR, and this is where the gaps start getting a little wider. PLTR versus SE, we have PLTR at a 69.98% versus the SE's 30.02%. And Square versus DMTK would be 79.3% versus 20.27%.
So which one of those matchups really stood out to you and you were kind of surprised? You had this notion of, oh, maybe it's going to go this way. And then you looked at it and you're like, wow, the algorithm just doesn't think it's going to go that way.
Absolutely. I would say the XRP versus GameStop, especially with all of the trouble that XRP has run into recently with the SEC and all of that. I just thought that GameStop, being the meme stock that it is, would absolutely take the cake on that one, but sentiment said otherwise.
It's so cool also that your sentiment's saying that, because for those who haven't been following along, XRP has kind of been this Cinderella story. They're like the UCLA of our bracket. They beat AMC in the first round, which AMC was rated as a 3 seed, just behind GME and Bitcoin. Then they went up against Skills. I don't really think anybody thought they had a chance against Skills. Skills is really a Fintuit favorite. A lot of backing, a lot of people loving it. It beat Skills, and now it faces GME, and you're telling me it's favored to beat GME. It's like a crazy circular thing going on here. When you see those numbers that are coming on with sentiment, how heavily accurate, maybe not an accuracy, but those are coming from some of the larger people on Fintuit, right? Or were you just analyzing the overall 10,000 tweets about them?
So yeah, this came from the entire Twitter community, not just the people we're currently analyzing. And in terms of accuracy, I mean, we are rather new. We're about 2 months old, and we're constantly making changes to our NLP, our natural language processing, and just the entire process that we're working through. But I think some of them are super significant. For me, I have, just based on these numbers, I have Bitcoin winning the whole thing. We'll see if that happens. But yeah.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. And I'm very excited to see how your numbers go. I don't know if you could maybe make like a post with the numbers that you have, or send them all to me and I'll make a graphic out of it, because I would love to do some type of collab with that and see what the outcome actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. I could try and put something like that together for you.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much. And also, Guru will be back on Wednesday night. And again, I just recommend giving them a follow, because what they're doing is super interesting. I love the social sentiment area of the market. But let's get to, and thank you so much, Guru, for coming on as well, of course, anytime. And we have 2 more speakers here that I do want to touch on. So first, Luke, been waiting patiently. Mike, I'm going to get to you, no worries. Luke, although sadly, BA has been knocked out by AbbVie, which is AbbVie's another big underdog here. Just want to say AbbVie went through Berkshire, and now it went through Boeing, and now it has to go through BABA. So it is really running the gauntlet here. But you came back, and we're going to chat Facebook, because Facebook's still in this, and it's going against Goldman Sachs, who's kind of had some upsets of their own. So talk to me about Facebook as a stock, maybe break into some of the nitty gritty for a few minutes, and then just chat about this matchup of Facebook versus Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, definitely. I can do that. So, digging into Facebook, it's one of those FANG names. It's one of those FANG names that actually for the past few months, up to just about a week ago, was mostly out of favor. Those FANG names were building bases, while a lot of other names were moving heavily to the upside. So you dig into Facebook, you take a look at their most recent quarter, and really, if you want to hit at what the Bears like to say about Facebook, they tend to say that their age demographic is too old. Well, you take a look at their age demographics, and their largest demographic is 25 to 34 years old. So I mean, that argument, in my opinion, actually most of the user base is below 34. Bear case for Facebook. They continue to see growth. Their most recent quarter, Q4, they saw 33% growth in revenues. If you dig into those revenues, 31% growth in advertising revenues, which it makes up pretty much nearly all of their revenues. There's not much else there besides advertising revenues. Income from operations up 44%, net income up 53%, EPS improved by 51% year over year. Margins continue to improve. You saw, gross margin go to 46% from 42%. Daily active users, those jumped 11%, and monthly active users up 12%. So they continue to see growth, even though they're huge. They have Instagram now. That's been there for a little bit now. And, Instagram's also just continues to expand. So I really look at Facebook, and it's one of those names that I really don't see going anywhere for quite a while. Now they have had their issues. They've had a lot of those hearings, Senate, House hearings. The government likes to say that they're going to do something with Facebook, break up Facebook. They like to say that stuff, but if you really look back and you really look to what's happened most recently, it tends to be the typical all talk, no action. Nothing really happens. And I do think that it's going to continue to be like that. I think Facebook is pretty much free to do whatever the heck it wants, and no one's really done anything about it. And I don't think anyone's going to step up and do anything about whether they're doing anything wrong or not. I tend to be on the side that if you really take a look at, say, the acquisition of Instagram, which some like to attack, I think it's a bit ridiculous. It was approved. And now it's all worked out for them. So really, Facebook is an excellent company. Leadership tends to do well. And if we want to talk about sentiment, just today we got a negative headline. It was, a data leak out of Facebook, something like 533 million accounts. And the stock made a new 52-week high. So when it comes to sentiment, I think sentiment's mostly positive. It's definitely of late, it's turned positive. It's moved back to the upside. So I don't think there's not much negative with Facebook. And, really, if you want to dig way into it, the balance sheet's rock solid. The multiples on it, on a valuation basis, obviously it trades at a premium, but it's not horrendous. Management has been quite effective, return on assets of, nearly 20% and return on equity of 25%. So overall, it's, one of those classic FANG names, continues to outperform, and I think it's going to outperform for a while.
That is a strong case there, and I'm inclined to agree. I think that Facebook has gone ahead and they capture that market, right? They have so many users, so much money, so much cash inflow now that they can experiment with all these different ideas, and especially like you said with VR, the strides that they're making in that area are just unparalleled by many other companies, and they can do that because they have the ability for R&D. They have those systems. They have people to test it on, that type of stuff. On the other side, we have the banking industry. Now, Goldman Sachs, if you haven't looked at their stock, might not sound that sexy. And if you were to go back a year or two, you'd be right. I mean, they moved up a good amount from 2016, and then they just floated around 200 to 250 for about 3 years. And they took a tough beating last March, like everyone did, all the way down to 138. But they are up 100% year over year, 108%. They're all the way up to $324. Pretty much their all-time high. They hit their all-time high about 2-3 weeks ago with the rest of the tech stocks and that type of stuff. What do you think about the banking area and GS going up against Facebook?
I take a look at banks, and personally, I'm not a long-term holder. I don't have any long-term bank position. amongst my portfolios. At the end of the day, Goldman Sachs, it's an excellent investment bank. They continue to kill it. I don't think they're going anywhere for quite a while. One thing when it comes to the banks that a lot of people continue to push on the bear side of things is fintech, and whether a lot of these big banks are eventually going to be affected by the fintech space. I really haven't done much digging into that specifically, but I do know, on a valuation basis, Goldman Sachs is much more attractive than Facebook. But that's if you're just going off valuation. When you're talking Facebook, there's plenty of growth still over the course of the next 10, 20 years. I look at Goldman Sachs, what's the amount of growth there in the next 10, 20 years compared to Facebook? So when it comes to sentiment, I think, technology tends to be a favorite among especially new investors and the people who typically chat about, major names in the market. So I do think if you look to the future, and if investors continue to look to the future, which, they always do, I think that Facebook is going to be more favored than Goldman Sachs.
I would sit with you there. Here's the thing with this matchup. I expect Facebook to do really well when it comes to getting the votes. Popular name, everybody has the app, all that stuff. But I would not be surprised by a Goldman Sachs upset. I could see it coming in there, and I could see it winning. I could see people going, "Oh, Goldman," like that's type of stuff. Looking at their stock, maybe their stock's doing fantastic. Not that Facebook isn't, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I do see the side that you're saying. Real quick, just on that banking area, and maybe anybody could take this, and then we're going to go to Mike. Question in my DMs, and for all the listeners, please shoot some more questions in because we're almost at that place, almost at that time. Question from Lee Evans. He asked, are you or any thoughts on taking positions in some of the banking sector as a hedge against inflation? For example, Ameris Bancorp, Live Oak Bank Shares, Wells Fargo. I guess I don't know if Goldman Sachs comes in here. They're kind of in a different area than some of them. But Luke, any thoughts? And if not, I can ask around. I'm sure maybe Max with his credit analyst abilities. Any thoughts on that question on taking position in the banking sector as a hedge against inflation? Just brought it up because we were talking about Goldman.
Right. So, when I take a look at the banks, I have a few quick thoughts. Definitely within the past few months, they've come back into favor. In the March crash, the COVID-19 crash, whatever you want to call it, from that, the recovery from that, it was mostly tech-led. And then a few weeks ago, months ago, actually, we saw everything starting to flip. We saw the recovery plays starting to get some love, and now they've gotten quite a bit. And the banks were part of that. And, he specifically asked about Wells Fargo. I played it, just about a month ago, made a few points there. At the end of the day, Wells Fargo in the banking space is, I call it an underdog play. It's similar to Boeing in the aerospace space. It had a lot of issues in the past, especially the last few years, but they are starting to take the right steps and have taken the right steps to improve themselves, get themselves back on track. So specifically towards Wells Fargo, I think long-term, it's one of those plays that, they have work to do. There's going to need to be some more improvement there. But they're definitely on the track to coming back to where they once were. Now, if I were to pick, say, 3 banks to go for, I would probably, my number one, if you're looking for a long-term bank, would be JP Morgan. It's the best of breed. And my second up would be Goldman. And, then third, it would probably be tied between a Bank of America, which is rock solid. It's a Buffett favorite, or you go your underdog direction with Wells Fargo. So those are pretty much my thoughts on banks. I did actually, not to pitch this, but, on my website, you can find the link. Last week, I broke down Bank of America. It's an excellent bank. It's another one of those names that you can hold long, and I think you'll do quite well. In the short term, I think you'll be pressed to get a lot more out of the banks at the moment. But in the mid to long term, I definitely think there's still upside.
I agree. And that was a fantastic analysis. I didn't even ask you to prepare on banks. And you just came in and wowed us with the bank talk. And 100%, I think everyone's right. Go check out Luke's website. He's putting up fantastic content consistently. it's one of the best ways to educate yourself, right? Go and find someone that knows what they're talking about, read what they're saying, what they're publishing, listen to his podcasts. It's the way that we learn from each other. It's why I love these spaces so much is I get to learn from all of you. I just get to ask you all the questions that I'm interested in. All right, Mike, hope you're on and listening. So investing with Mike, he's on here. Not a huge crowd on Twitter, but he's got a ton of followers on TikTok. My man's sitting on like 80K or something like that. So he's got a bunch of backing, and you can find him on Instagram as well. And I brought on Mike tonight because he is my PSTH guy. So always chatting PSTH and talking PSTH with me. We even did a pod on it. And I don't know if any of y'all saw, but PSTH came out of left field and beat ARKK. So, Mike, tell me what's going on with PSTH, why you like it so much. You're out here buying PSTH, selling puts, doing all this stuff around PSTH. Tell me about your thoughts on PSTH and how it went and beat ARKK.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. And yeah, I was really shocked by PSTH beating ARK. Even though I'm bullish on PSTH, I had ARK winning. So I'm a little upset. There goes my points. So hopefully, PSTH makes it far. But I'm really bullish on PSTH. I sell puts on them every month, hoping to get them at a cheaper price and make money along the way, right? To me, I look at PSTH almost as a free money stock. Okay, I feel like it'll be really hard to lose money on PSTH because once there's a merger announced, that thing could go to $50, $60, who knows? It really depends on the company, right? Right now, from what I see, it could be Stripe. And if it's Stripe, that everyone's going to love that. You can't go wrong with that. So I'm selling puts. Right now, I have about 10 puts on PSTH, and it's at $25. So if PSTH stays under $25, I'm going to buy 1,000 shares, which is 25 grand. And I'll be comfortable with that. Like I said, I'm bullish. I have some call options on them right now, some leaps. So, to me, I think it's almost free money. However, who knows when that merger is going to come out, right? So in the meantime, I'm going to invest my money elsewhere and invest a little bit into PSTH and dabble into them.
Awesome. And it's funny that you didn't even kind of pick them. I think most people just thought ARKK was a bit of a lock here with its background. For those who aren't super familiar with PSTH, maybe just explain to them who's backing it, why you, maybe one of the companies that you think it could go ahead and acquire, and why you're comfortable just sitting on it.
Yeah, so if you guys aren't familiar with PSTH, it's backed by Bill Ackman. I'm sure most of you know Bill Ackman. He's the guy who goes on the media and be extra dramatic so that the stock market could go in the direction he wants it to go, which is he's willing to do what it takes to make money, right? He's willing to go on TV and say what he's got to say to kind of manipulate the market in the way that he wants. So he's a businessman, and I'm willing to put my money on him. I think he even did an extra round of raising money a couple weeks ago, I believe, so that he could acquire maybe even a bigger company. So that's good news right there. Though I do think I noticed that PSTH obviously dropped from like $33 to like 24 or whatever. That's just because SPACs overall have been getting hit hard. And if you guys don't know what SPACs are basically a company that's their purpose is to merge with a private company and bring them public. So that's what PSTH is doing, right? They don't have any operations. They're just looking for a private company that wants to go public. They're going to merge with them and bring them public that way instead of going through an IPO. So as I mentioned, I think Stripe could be a good option. And if it is, I'll be very happy with that.
Like that. I like that. That was a good call. And a nice breakdown there, Mike. Is PSTH one of your largest holdings?
It's not. Right now I have leaps on them and I sell puts, right? So if my puts get executed and I have to buy 1,000 shares at $25 a share, then it will be the largest holding. If I have to buy 25 grand worth of it, it will be. But as of right now, I only have about 3K worth of leaps. So call options that are dated for January 22nd, 2023. So I only have about 3K invested into them right now, but it could potentially be 28K. if my put options get executed.
Appreciate that, Mike. And Luke, sounds like you have a word on PSTH.
Yeah, I mostly agree with everything said there about PSTH. It's within my portfolios. It's actually two separate positions amongst two separate portfolios. It's one of my spec plays. It was mentioned. It's sponsored by Bill Ackman. I think what's unique about Pershing Square here is that the way it is set up itself is much different than most other SPACs. It's more investor friendly to the retailers. I hear a lot of talk, even out of a few interviews from Bill himself, that he is more on the retail side there. He really wants to, really make something happen for the retail investors. And then if you look at the institutional investors behind Pershing at the moment, it's actually quite impressive. He's built quite a list of funds there that I think is only going to build an even better case for the SPAC itself. I've never been a huge fan of the SPAC craze. I think a lot of it is mostly just, pump and dump names, but some of them tend to do quite well. And I do think that Pershing Square is going to be one of them. And, when it's mentioned target wise, I 100% agree on that front. I think the target is going to be quite a solid target, especially with the amount of capital Bill's working with now. So, while he did miss his original Q1 deadline, I think an announcement within the next few months wouldn't be, it wouldn't be surprising. So it's definitely an exciting name to watch.
Definitely. I'm going to keep my eye on it. Real quick, bringing it back. Lamonte, you just sent me 6 statistics. You want to lay those out for the group?
Yeah, I probably should have touched on this when we were all focused on the crypto side, but actually right before this call, I pulled in daily data for Bitcoin and Ethereum back to the 1st of January 2020 and just pretty much calculated the daily returns and calculated the correlation between daily returns between Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it's roughly holding at about 78%, which is expected in very similar fashions, just with differences in volatility. And then also to that point, the average up day. So you can think of this as across that time frame of the daily returns, you take the difference of it and you only look at the up days. On average, on an up day, Ethereum moves about 2% more than Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin goes up 1% in the day, on average, Ethereum goes up about 3%. On the downside, though, Ethereum goes down about 2.64 percentage points more than Bitcoin. So it's that difference in volatility to keep in mind. And that's also somewhat asymmetrical when you go up 2% on average on your up days, percentage points wise, and minus 2.6% percentage points on your down days. So that's also just something to keep in mind.
Interesting. And you also had a note on PSTH?
Yeah, PSTH is very interesting. I actually was looking into buying them initially when it came on to the secondary market. It has roughly that $20 a share support, people will say, because of the amount of cash they have ready for acquisition. Another way to think of it is kind of their book value per share sits around 20x. But PSTH, one of the interesting things that I haven't seen any other SPAC do is Bill Ackman agreed to giving kind of first mover to PSTH shareholders when they go and open up a second special purpose acquisition company. So that's kind of interesting, kind of getting that first buyer. It's kind of like, this is your ticket, buy PSTH, and now for PSTH2, you kind of have that preference on being able to buy that before it's on the secondary market. And then lastly, on PSTH, I recommend anyone that's looking into them or looking into SPACs more generally, if they disclose it, they actually disclose their criteria on what they're looking for in their acquisition company. So just to rattle these off super quick and not go into them. They're really looking for predictable free cash flow generating companies, formidable barriers to entry, very hard to enter the industry, limited exposure to extrinsic factors that they cannot control. So think about limited exposure to some outside risks that they can't control, whether it be regulatory, interest rate, cyclical risks, stuff like that. They're looking for a strong balance sheet. So you can think of this in terms of assets outpacing your liabilities. Maybe they have low debt loads, things of that nature. Minimal capital markets dependency, large capitalization. That one's kind of expected with the amount of capital they have. And then is traded at a attractive private valuation. So that's kind of some of the things that Bill Ackman's looking for in a business. I think that's an excellent way of outlining it. That kind of, in my opinion, when I read those off, kind of thinks of like a value tilt essentially. But we'll see. It's interesting. I think he's a smart man. I think he knows what he's doing with the capital and for the shareholders, but it'll be interesting to see what the target is here in the coming months to years.
Sweet. Appreciate that. And just two last things to wrap this up. So first off, in case anyone's a new listener, I just want to introduce myself as the host. My name's Gav Blacksberg, and I'm the COO of Wolf Financial. We're running Market Madness Tournament. I'm going to be running spaces really throughout the rest of the week. And then in the coming weeks, you're going to have a lot of your favorite speakers on, all of the ones that are up here, in addition to people like Parrot Stock, Jonah Lupton, Brian Feroldi, and me we're talking about, Half Point. So several of those. So make sure that you're just part of the Wolf Pack. So you are always open